Hi, everybody. This is Sam Roberts, IndieCade's Festival Director. I'm here to welcome you to the IndieCade Climate Greenlight Jam for 2024. I'm also here to talk about Ideation, which is our first week of work here for the Greenlight Jam. In a big 5-week jam like this, where we try to follow a full production process, this is where every game starts. In a full production process, this is where every game starts. In ideation in Blue Sky, coming up with what our game will be. And then we take that game all the way through until we reach a gold master, when we can release it on a public platform where people can play it. So I'm here to give you some hints and tricks to talk about where we come up with the ideas for games. I'm often telling game designers who are like, well, how do I come up with a great game idea? And I say, just go and live your life, be a part of the world, take long walks, go and do exciting adventures in nature, go to museums and be inspired by art, read books and love them, watch movies that are amazing or television shows, go and listen to great music, right? Ideas for games can come from anywhere. Something you see that sparks an exciting mechanic or interaction, a story you see that you think could be told in the format of a game, a lesson that you want to share that you think you could build an interaction around evocatively. Any of these things can be a game. And so, of course, your next question is going to be, fine, but how do I pick which one? How do I think about what are the things I've seen in my life are going to make a game? And once I have that idea, well, how do I go from like, oh, that was cool to, well, this is how we're going to try to make a game around it. So I'm going to talk about some pretty simple tools that I want to share with you that are part of my ideation process. Some of them are part of everyone's ideation process almost, but some of them aren't. You don't have to use any of these, but I want to give you some basically tips and tricks about how to start something like this. Now, you guys have been given a little bit of help because this jam, of course, is climate themed and has a specific theme for the year called Change the Story. The idea that we got to change away from fossil fuels to change the world. These are nice. They give you some restrictions to start with. And restrictions are actually a great way to fire brainstorming. Now, brainstorming is often where everyone starts an ideation process, just writing ideas down on the board. Now, this can be powerful if you have nothing to start with, but often we go through multiple rounds of brainstorming. So maybe the first thing that you actually want to do is brainstorm what are all the cool things I've seen or done recently that might be related to the climate, right? Or maybe aren't even cool. I filled my car at the gas station. That's climate related. That's fossil fuel related. I took a walk by the ocean. That's climate related. I planted tulips in my garden. That's climate related, or nature related at least, right? You might brainstorm all these ideas and find one that's exciting. I recently read Silent Spring, the famous environmental book from the 60s. That's climate related, right? You could brainstorm a bunch of this stuff that's been in your life and see what on that list excites you. Later on, you might brainstorm about a specific thing. Oh, we've decided to make a game based on Silent Spring. What are the elements of Silent Spring? What's in there? How can we find out what's going on? Now, sometimes though we get stuck. We want to move out and figure out a little bit more of what's going on. So here's where I want to talk a little bit about two tools that I like to use when I am ideating a game. Now, these are because I am often inspired to make games by narratives and by systems, and sometimes by narratives about systems and systems about narratives, but doesn't matter. Let's talk about narratives first. So I'm often inspired by narratives, a story in a book, often actually, though, like a myth or a legend, or even like a story I read in the newspaper. And I like to use this tool that was made by a man called Bertolt Brecht that's called the fable. And a fable is basically a retelling of a story from your own perspective in a short, condensed fashion. Now, Brecht was a theater director. His job, as he viewed it, was to take texts written by other people and find out what he was passionate about them so that he could create an art object, a performance that told that text from his point of view. And he believed very strongly that you have to take a point of view when you craft a performance to communicate anything and to inspire a reaction in your audience. So he would simply like read his base text and then he would rewrite it in his own words, paragraph, sometimes two at most, trying to look for what was important about the story to him, what was essential about it. Very famously, he did a very famous production of Hamlet. He wrote a fable where he writes all about the political machinations that are underlying the actual plot of the play. The play ends, of course, with Fortinbras standing over all the dead people in Denmark with an army behind him. An army that has been waiting for the whole length of the play to cross Denmark to fight another army, right? And now that the royal family of Denmark is dead, they can do so freely. And so Brecht's play was all about this. And he wrote this fable that's full of these political machinations. He discovered that that's what he cared about. And he pulled out all of the political stuff that was in the play and forefronted it. This is a tool I use all the time for brainstorming a game. Oh, I'm inspired by this text, by Silent Spring. Well, what are the elements of Silent Spring? It's rivers, it's dying fish, it's pollution, it's the sort of veins of nature as they move through our country. And I would discover that stuff by rewriting that narrative or that story in my own words. And then what I like to do when I'm making a game is I mine it for verbs. I read what I've written and I say, what are the actions? What are the verbs? What are people doing in this short story that I've written? Because these lead me to mechanics. They lead me to interactions. They lead me to ideas that I can build a game out of. And then as I go through my process, I return again and again to my fable looking for other details. Oh, well, now I need a creature that shows up in my game. What creatures were in the fable I wrote? Oh, well, I've got fish here and I've got deer. Maybe I want to use one of those, right? This is a very powerful tool that I love because it helps focus my brainstorms. Once I've come up with something I'm really passionate about, I can dive into it and start to find what matters in it to me so that I can make the game I want to make. Now, narratives are only one place I get inspired. I also, as I said, get inspired by systems. Now, being inspired by systems is its own fun thing, but it's about being out in nature and noticing something that must be a system. Now, what's amazing is so much of nature in the world are systems, cultural systems, right? I talked about the gas station. That is a system where fuel gets brought to the gas station and people take it away. This picture behind me is of a waterfall that I visited a very long time ago. Now, waterfalls are systems, right? The river brings water, gravity makes the water fall, and they have all these repercussions and things that they create, right? Uh, not as many different kinds of animals can survive in the water over a waterfall, but the bottoms of waterfalls create deep ponds. Ponds are great places that fill up with life. Nearby a waterfall, the air is always very humid and full of mist that helps support different kinds of plant life and different kinds of animals. It becomes a center in dry places where animals can come to get water at this pond that's created, where they can get cooler. These are all super cool things that are about the system of a waterfall, right? And the tool I like to use here is I simply like to diagram the system. I like to apply a systems thinking lens. This is an idea propagated by Donella Meadows, who's a systems thinker and academic. Meadows was an agriculturist and thought a lot about economic systems and sociological systems, but really we can use a systems thinking lens to analyze anything. And the basics, the very fundamental, simplest systems, the way that Meadows likes to think about them is simply that once you have a system, you have to think about the stock of that system. Now, this is something that's measurable. In a bathtub, it might be water. In a waterfall, it might be water, right? And then you have to think about where that stock is increased from and how it's decreased. And that's the basics of a system. Then you can start to think more about what is that causing to happen? What are the other elements of this system and how it connects? But you can bring your systems lens to anything by thinking about what's the stock here that I care about? And what are the inflows I care about and the outflows that I care about? My waterfall has an inflow that comes from a river. Now, that river's inflow might be influenced by rain, it might be influenced by snow melt, it might be influenced by any number of things upstream. I have to decide which ones I care about, but now I have a focused lens to do that. The outflows, obviously, gravity makes it fall down, right? And then it flows down the river, but it's also drunk by nearby animals. The falling turns water into water mist in the air. There's ways that we lose water from this system, right? It's even got a mechanic in it, right? The key mechanic to a waterfall is gravity, um, which is a physics mechanic, which we're very used to using in games, right? But in this way, thinking about the waterfall as a system, I can start to, again, just like I do with the Fabel, pull out elements that become my game pieces, that become my mechanical elements, that can eventually become my dramatic. Now, whether I've done a Fabel or systems thinking or both off my initial brainstorm list, I now have a more focused idea and something I can mine for details. So at this point, I'm brainstorming again off that mining for details. I may brainstorm off of, well, this systems diagram, what else belongs in there? What else goes in there? This Fabel is good, but it's not perfect. What else was in that text? What does this make us think of? What other elements can we come up with? And I can rebuild new, more focused lists of stuff that might go into my game. And now this is for the next two tools that I'll go through pretty quickly. This is the point to start researching. Now that I've got this idea and I've got myself a little framework to think about it with, I have to find the things that are most exciting in there, and I want to go and learn a little bit more about them so that I can get some more elements and some more ideas that might spark either another round of this process or bring me to, oh, here is a fantastic mechanic that I want to make. Once we've got that fantastic mechanic, this is the moment to prototype. Not a big prototype, not a fancy prototype, a super simple prototype. It can be a thought prototype. It can be something you talk a person through, but say, oh, this is a mechanic. How can I test if this mechanic is fun right away? I'm going to call my mom and I'm going to say, Mom, if I told you that you were able to add rain or remove rain, and by doing so, you were going to change the way a waterfall and the nature around a waterfall worked, would that be fun? Let's try. Tell me if you want to add rain, and I'll describe the waterfall. That's super simple, but it's still a prototype of the mechanic, and you can start to get a sense of how it might feel and what else might be needed for it. And this is the process. We brainstorm, we use tools to focus that brainstorm, get us to a next stage, identify something we want to mine, and then we research that and we prototype it, and we use that to recycle through the process, abandoning ideas that don't quite fit and honing idea. What we're doing when we're ideating is we're going from a giant space of games we could make to the single game that we want to make. And that's what all of these tools are focused on. And as we are doing those late stages, the research and the prototyping, it's good to keep in mind the next phases of the process. We're going to have to formally prototype this idea. And as we do that, to find out the exact shape of what goes in it. Is it a game with monsters? Is it a game with jumping challenges? Is it a game with menus? Is it a game with characters, right? What are the things that are going to make up our game? We're going to discover that in our next phase as we go through prototyping and pre-production, right? We're going to have to produce it. Is this game of a scope where we can make it in a week? Does it have tons of systems that we won't have time to do, or does it have a focus system? And eventually, we're going to have to bring it to Gold Master. Is this a game that we can release on itch as a tabletop game that is print and play PDF, as in-browser Unity game that you can just go to the itch page and play? What is that going to look like, and how can we make sure that that is easy to use and do for the people who we want to play it, right? And this is my little lecture about ideation. I hope that some of these tools are useful to you. I'm so excited to see the games that you come up with over this month plus a little bit. The climate is an incredibly important thing, and I think we all have tons of deep thoughts about it. And we can't make a game that will just fix the climate, but we can make a game that expresses something that is important to us about this idea. And in doing so, helps talk to other people about things they maybe could do, or just that it is important that they care about these things as well. So please go off and ideate fruitfully. And thank you so much for being a part of the jam. Bye.